Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What are you writing? Because I love hearing from you. I love knowing that you are reading all kinds of interesting books, especially the books that I've introduced you to, like the one I'm going to introduce you to today. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, and my guest today is Angela R. Hughes. And Angela, hold up your book cover, please. Look at that beautiful cover. She and I were just talking about covers. I love that cover. So Angela, let me tell you a little bit about her. And she's going to tell you mostly about herself. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book. So she is a historical fantasy writer, magic, intrigue, and even King Arthur himself converge in this epic novel. Will the insidious dark shadow Eleanor uncovers leave death and devastation throughout the land? That's the question. Join Eleanor on her journey to find her true identity and the power that lies within her in the Once and Future Chronicles, Book 1, Eleanor and the Song of the Bard. Welcome, welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So we are, what are you reading? What are you writing? That's our take. So before we delve into your book, tell us a little bit about your life as a reader. What did you read when you were younger? Tell us a little bit about your reading life.
Well, I grew up in the generation of Rankin Boss cartoons. I don't know if you ever watched those, Flight of the Dragons and The Hobbit and The Last Unicorn. And then, things like The Dark Crystal were, big movies in the 80s. And all of those really shaped and formed me as a young person, just my love for fantasy. And I remember when I was probably about 9 or 10 and I picked up The Princess and the Goblin. And I began to read that story. And there was I was, up until I picked up that book, reading just seemed like hard work to me. And that was the story that I read that I first realized how you could escape into a story. And it was just as magical as watching all of these movies and shows that had captured my attention when I was younger. And so I continued on to just read the entire series. I know The Lost Princess by George MacDonald. This is the author of The Princess and the Goblin. The Lost Princess captured me even on another level. It was fantastic. It was spiritual, but then even beyond that, it touched on areas of healing that I wasn't expecting even as a young person, that helped me reflect on myself as the character in the story. And ever since then, I was finished. And I picked up so many fantasy books and began to read, and just never really stopped.
Wow, that's a great story. So so now, like, what kinds of books do you read now, and how have they influenced your storytelling?
I still am an epic fantasy nerd. I lovingly dub myself a nerd because I can really sell into a story and the author and how they write. And I think, one of the authors that I am currently reading and I can't get enough of, he is series upon series, but his name is Stephen Lawhead. And what I particularly love about his writing, so he has a series called The Song of Albion. And he also has a series of the Pendragon Cycle. And all of his stories are fantasy with an element of real history, real mythology into the mix. And something about his writing style really captured me as someone who loves J.R.R. Tolkien. Like, I still, to this day, I picked up J.R.R. Tolkien not long after I had read the Princess and the Goblin series and read it years, like every year it became my thing. Like, I would pick up that series and I would read it again. And what I loved about J.R.R. Tolkien was also there was this real language, this almost real history that appeared off the page. It made readers ask questions like as though we're real world. Well, where did the Balrogs come from? Where did the elves come from? Like we had all these questions as though this world existed.
Yeah.
And that magic, that's what I love about a story, as a child, I think even as an adult. There's always that hope of finding that house with the secret door, or the tree that leads you into another world. Like I'm still that way. And I think that's one of my favorite things about writing is it's like the best game of pretend you can play as an adult. You get to actually not just allow your imagination to just go into all of these places, but you get to make it real for other people as well. But J.R.R. Tolkien really, really influenced me in a serious way as far as me capturing the love for Celtic mythology, Norse mythology, and history of Wales and England and Ireland and Scotland, just the kind of the mythos and the legend that surrounded those areas. And Stephen Lougheed is someone who really captures that as well in his writings. And he even took me further on an adventure, because now I'm reading these books about King Arthur and I'm fascinated. And I had never read the classic stories of King Arthur up to picking up his books. And something about it felt real to me. So I went, oh gosh, I'm going to nerd out because that's what I do. And I started taking classes online about Celtic mythology. I started taking classes about Arthurian legend, found out it was way older, way bigger, way more epic than I had ever imagined. It was more than this medieval story. It was more of an ancient story. And some of these legends were attached to real people and real places, which again, just fascinates me. Because when you take the realm of fantasy, I've always loved, how Greek mythology and Celtic mythology, mythologies in general, they almost touch on like real history, but
Yes.
they,
Yeah,
and so for me, I'm like, oh, I wanted to do that as well. And so Stephen Lougheed really helped me be fascinated with Arthurian legend to begin with, and made me just become fascinated with the story. And I've continued to read his series, and all of them have this element of history that captures my attention.
Yeah, so that's the historical fantasy piece.
Yes.
coming together in your brand new trilogy that's going to get started. So when I started all three of my books, when I started them, they started with somebody talking in my head. I remember somebody saying to me, she said, and it's just as if my characters are real. And I said, what do you mean, as if? As if? What is that? Of course they're real, So how did your book start for you? What was that initial spark?
I'd always been a reader. Grammar and English had always been something that I was good at, but I never expected to become an author, if that makes sense. And as I'm studying, as I say, I was studying Arthurian legend and just really going down that route of learning mythologies. And all of a sudden, kind of like you said, it was like this story began to play in my head that would not let me go. I remember my husband and I would be driving in a car and I was off. Like just the story was going, and he'd be talking and I wouldn't even know that he was speaking to me because I was captured. And the story just continued. It's almost like, for lack of a better word, like I was kind of losing my mind because the story had so captured me that I almost had no choice. I felt like I have to write this down so that I can get it out of my head. And some of the story that developed in my mind was this dissatisfaction. I am a lover of Shakespeare and a lover of stories, and I'm okay with a sad ending. Sometimes it brings in, when you watch Braveheart, those stories, you hate that sad ending, or Romeo and Juliet, but it had a point. And there was something about the end of Arthurian legend. It always ends with Arthur's death, and it didn't make sense to me. That complete tragedy didn't align with my idea of how the story should have gone. It almost was like it betrayed you, because here was all this promise, all of this destiny, everyone had jumped on this bandwagon of this coming kingdom, and, Merlin, bringing him up as king and helping to forge this kingdom. And then right as it was getting going, it was completely devastated and it was gone. Like the promise never was
materialized.
realized.
Yeah.
Yes. And so for me, I was like, I'm not satisfied with that. Normally I'm okay with the tragedy, but I wasn't okay with this tragedy. It seemed like, destiny and promise, there still needed to be something more to come. And so I began to develop this idea of the story that, well, what happened next? Was it really over? So my story really starts with the death of Arthur, and you see this kind of the dark night of the soul. Merlin is we introduce a story with him in a complete depression, wanting to die. Like it's everything that they had been working for, everything that had come, and almost answering that question: what happens when the worst comes, when everything we've been working for is suddenly robbed of us? How do we hope again? How do we turn around after something devastating and believe that there still is a promise that can come? And so there's the premise of the beginnings of my story is kind of in this low place, and then building it from there. And that there is hope, but it takes a while to climb back out of that hole and begin to build back up maybe the misunderstanding of what the promise was in the first place. And
that is very intriguing. Oh my goodness.
That's what intrigued me. That's what made me not be able to, like you said, be able to let go of the story. I had to answer this in my mind, that maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe there was still something more to be had.
So when did this first book come out?
It was just released this June 24th. So it's a brand new book, baby. It came out this summer.
And how are you doing with the next book? Is it finished? Are you in progress?
Yes, I just, as soon as I finished book 1, I went straight on to book 2, and it's actually complete. It is on the editor's table as we speak, and I'm very excited about this one. It expands the whole universe, the whole story, the whole idea of where I'm going. And then book 3, I'm about halfway into that book as well. And my goal is to have it written in the next 3 or 4 months. So have that one done as well. I've got this bug in me, like I said, it kind of this world that filled my brain. I almost need to get it all out before I can, lift up my hands and be like, done.
That's awesome. So when does book 2 come out?
My hope is that it will be released in 2023. We don't have a date yet for it, but that is my hope.
Hopefully
is that
a year, maybe a year later when the first one is a year old.
Yes. So my hope is at least by next June, if not earlier.
Yeah, that is awesome. So that's such good news, folks, because that means that you won't have to wait very long. You get this one and there's not a long wait, so you can see what happens next. If our audience, I had another really important question I wanted to ask you though. So if you had a chance to sit down and maybe bring Eleanor with you to sit down to have lunch or a glass of wine or a conversation with a character from some other book that you loved, who would you like Eleanor to meet, or who would you like to meet?
That's such a hard question for me. I have to really think about this one, because almost every character to me, it's like I want to choose the character that reflects best the author. And I would say that maybe as nerdy as it sounds, again, proud nerd. I think I would love to sit down and have an ale or a pint with Gandalf and of Lord of the Rings. The reason being is because to me, he's the best personification of J.R.R. Tolkien in a fantasy setting that I could come up with. I think the questions would be unlimited and the answers would be more satisfying than I could ever hope for, just enjoying the world of J.R.R. Tolkien and J.R.R. Tolkien himself, who's a fascinating character. Him and C.S. Lewis formed a group called the Inklings. And I love the idea of other creatives coming together and cheering each other on as we create these worlds and create these ideas. Something happens when creatives come together that makes us even better than we ever thought we could be. And so the idea of sitting with Gandalf to me would be almost like an invitation to getting to be an inkling and getting to really nerd out on things that never were, but were in my own imagination. They did exist. They were real. That it was a real place for me.
And they stay real on the page forever, right?
Yes.
That's one of the beautiful things. I love what you said about when creatives come together. That's been the best part of, I've come to being an author later in my life. And I had a wonderful career with great people, but it is not and it is so wonderful to get creatives together and how supportive we are of each other and how exciting it is to have conversations, and also the consoling, the things that are not going well, and all of that. It's a wonderful community, and it's just, I love it.
It really does. You've got a group of people that understand best how you work.
Yes.
Especially being an author, it's such a solitary thing that we do alone. And, you pine to be able to talk to these people that know what you're doing and know these journeys that you're taking on the page. And it does take people who are in that vein to really get it and inspire you. I mean, I think one of the most famous conversations between C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien was they were sitting at a table, and J.R.R. Tolkien's publisher wanted him to write another book. And this was before the conception of The Lord of the Rings. And he was writing about hobbits for all eternity, but he couldn't seem to get beyond the Hobbit. And C.S. Lewis said to him, it seems you do best when you write about hobbits doing things that are not Hobbit-like. And it was that very idea that helped him go, and write the rest of his story. And I think sometimes other creatives help unlock those pieces that we're just a little blind to at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you. That was awesome. So if our viewers, listeners wanted to find you, how could they find more about you? How can they find your book? How can they keep watching your progress?
Well, they can definitely go onto my website, www.angelarhughes.com, and that has all of the latest information, blogs, what books are being released, and things about myself and my journey and where I'm going. But you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram, even Book Talk, TikTok land. I definitely like to tell my TikTok stories using my epic fantasy legends as my muse on there as well.
Excellent. So I hope you will check this out. Let me just repeat the name of the book, The Once and Future Chronicles, Book 1, Eleanor, it's Elanor, and The Song of the Bard. We hope that you have enjoyed both. Angela and I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation, hope that we've intrigued you enough that you'll go check her books out, and that we've intrigued you enough that you'll come back next week for another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Thanks, everybody.